Hi, everybody. Can you hear me now? Yeah, great. Now that you can hear me, just so we're all clear, this is going to be like a very emotional talk, and we're not really going to be talking about, fun, do-it-this-way tech stuff. If you go to my website, I have like some talks about things like, eyeglasses and the future of the platform and fun tech stuff like that. But this is really going to be a different kind of talk. And to give you an idea of what I mean, I have some funeral programs here. If anybody is interested, they're just on the stage. You can come grab one after the talk. And also, I'm going to be really sort of speaking a bit extemporaneously. And I'm going to be talking about stuff that's not really super appropriate, maybe cussing and talking about shenanigans. So I just want to make sure everyone is okay with that. And if not, then maybe this is not the talk, and please accept my apologies. So on that note, I have to say that I'm very pleased to be back speaking at AltConf. I wish that it was under happier circumstances, but the fact is that I'm here today motivated because I lost someone very dear to me recently, my friend and protege, Tristan OʻTierney, excuse me. Tristan is best known as the co-founder of Square, but before that he was my trusted lieutenant through several projects and companies. His loyalty, always unquestioned. And I have so many amazing memories of him, but I feel like all I hear people say about him is, oh yeah, Tristan, I met him once, he's a great guy. And it makes me happy, like how widely known and respected Tristan is, but at the same time, it makes me sad how shallow his relationships became. It felt like the only people who actually knew him were the few people who actually knew him before he became the Tristan OʻTierney that everybody knows. So, I'll leave it to the people who didn't really know him to sing his praises. And instead, I want to tell you about my friend, Teabag. Yeah, no, he was a great guy. He really was, but he also used to poop in everyone's houses. Like, this was a thing of his. If you invited him over, like, the first thing he would do is he would go to your toilet and just... I never minded because I feel like my toilet is for pooping, but other people have definitely not felt the same way. And that was Tristan. Tristan had a way of violating your boundaries that made you laugh. He was like a big cat. And the best thing was that he brought this out in others. Whether it was smoking weed behind the police station or drag racing through the streets of San Jose, when Tristan was around, it was always shenanigans. He used to come to my house and spank my cats. It was the weirdest thing. Like, he would just they would get up on the sofa because they loved it when he came over, and he would just slap their thighs, or he'd grab my slippers and slap their thighs, and I found it deeply disturbing, and I think that's why he did it. Those were my cats. I love this picture because the tragedy of these cats were that the little brown cat loved the big gray cat, but the big gray cat hated the little brown cat. But they both loved Tristan. Yeah. So that's what I want to share with you today. I want to share with you some of the stories of this person that I love so much, and I want to share just I just want to lead by example, as I do in this community, that it's okay to experience and express emotions. And I want to share some of the things that I've learned in therapy that's helped me to deal with this loss. Because it's not just about me or Tristan, it's about all of you, the living future. I think Tristan's story, unfortunately, is just kind of sadly common. So I want to talk about what I think happened and how I think that this can be avoided. And finally, I want to impress upon you the fact that success can be more dangerous than failure. Case in point, Tapulous. Tapulous was a company that was awesome, that I co-founded in 2008. It was one of the very first companies to launch in the wake of the iFund announcement, and we did incredible work together in the first days of the App Store. But, you know, building a startup here in the Valley, it's about knowing people and getting great people in, and there were a lot of great people that I wanted to bring in, and none of them were Tristan. This is us then, back then, before iPhone was a dream. You know, when swipe left didn't mean anything. You know, when calling an Uber didn't mean anything. You know, when people made money with software, it was a different time. But the thing was, so this is really funny, how I ended up hiring Tristan, you know, because we were Mac developers, and I knew him, but I didn't really like him because he worked for Yahoo, and, you know. So it was like, when they brought the stuff over to the iPhone, they made some really weird decisions because, I don't know, everything was weird, nobody knew what was going on, really, and everybody was really nervous about the hardware underperforming, and so, for example, the address book, they just sort of didn't bring over the Objective-C half of it. And so like it was a toll-free bridge framework, but they just didn't bring the good part. They just brought the weird part. And not because C is weird, but because the address book C is weird, super weird. I could not figure it out, and I was super stressed, and I'm like, you know, in the valley, and I'm just like, the address book, please, God, help me. No, Twitter, help me. And back then, Twitter was basically just Valley nerds, and so Tristan showed up on my doorstep and fixed my address book problems. And I had put a $100 bounty on it, but he said, I don't want $100, I want a job. And so he was the first person who I interviewed, and he was the first person who I hired. And it was kind of a funny interview. I had never really interviewed anyone before. And so my partner basically said, it's really easy, you just take him to a fancy dinner and then just see if he'll be a good fit. And so we just ate some very overpriced ribs somewhere in Palo Alto, and you know, chit-chatted about technology or whatever, and then I was just kind of like, okay, well, it was nice talking to you, but you know, I've got a date to go smoke some weed with some Apple engineers, so, and he's just like, weed, you say? I was like, oh, would you be interested in playing a few rounds of a game we like to call volumetric bong hit Yahtzee? And he said, I would. And I said, well then, the real interview begins now. So yeah, no, I poached him from VMware, and he brought his friend Vinay Venkatesh as well to spend a month having some fun with us. And it's just, this picture is really, Vinay died about 10 years ago in a motorcycle accident that I witnessed and live tweeted because it was, you know, that time. And his dad died the week before Tristan did, and kind of set off this whole chain of events. So looking back and seeing a picture of them together in the old company shirt is really, you know, that's why we take pictures. So Tapulous, we made amazing products when no one had any idea what an iPhone app was or would be. We made, for example, the very first iPhone Twitter client, which was called Twinkle. And still kind of the best Twitter client I think that's ever existed, frankly. But there's this really funny moment of this, because this was Tristan's baby, right? Twinkle was Tristan's project. And so, but the thing was, you know, it looked like what you would expect it to look like. It looked like a Twitter client. But we had this new designer, this kid Louis. And oh, my partners hated him. But I just like, I saw his work, and I recognized what my mentor had recognized in his designer, Mike Mattis. This kid is the future of the platform. This kid is doing things that 10 years from now will still look current. And I knew that like, that was gonna be the soul of this company, was that design, that dedication to moving this platform forward. And Tristan was 100% on board with that. When we had to say, if you don't do what Louis says, we are going to quit, Tristan never said, but I have rent to pay. He was always right there. And having that person who always is your second on everything, that's what makes you look like you have charisma. That's what makes everyone else in the room feel like you can be trusted, not because of you, but because of the person who's standing next to you. But there's this one story about the creation of Twinkle, which I love because it was the moment that really determined what kind of company this was going to be. So we have this thing just about done, and then Louis shows up with these designs that are just radical. They are a radical departure from what we have. They are a radical departure from what anyone has ever seen. And so I'm looking at what's going on over here, and Louis says, like, this is fucking awesome, right? I mean, if it was my decision, I'd say we do this now, but we should probably just wait a few days. And then Tristan, the developer, is like, no, I think this is a great idea. I mean, we should wait a few days and make sure Twinkle's feature complete, but then we should take a few days to implement this. But then, Bart, my partner, who was always, against these sort of things, was just like, yeah, what I think we should do is just scrap this whole fucking project. Because they were all about Facebook and they really did not like Twitter. The only reason they let us make this was because we told them we would also make it into a Facebook client at some point. But anyway, what was funny was that I witnessed this conversation, and what I didn't realize was that actually they were reading what Louis had written there, but Louis understood the dynamic of this company so well that I didn't realize that they were reading what he had written there because it was exactly how it would have gone down. In fact, I'm actually not sure if they were reading it or not. That's never been clear to me. What is clear to me is that Louis really, yeah, he nailed that. He nailed that dialogue and he nailed that design. This is what I'm talking about because this is what it used to look like. This was the state of the art in 2008. And that just looks like rewarmed ass right now, right? That's like, wow, how embarrassing. That's like looking at fashion from 30 years ago, and it's just like, wow, why did people ever do that? If Twinkle came out today, it would still be the most beautiful goddamn Twitter client you've ever seen. This looks modern more than 10 years later because that kid was the future of the platform. And he did go to Apple. He did make his contributions. We do live in a post-Louis Mantilla world, whether we realize it or not. Just like we live in a post-Mike Mattis world, whether we realize it or not. But here's why I think that the tabular story is important, because we were the best, and we won. Everything we did became number one. When we had our first number one hit on the App Store with Tap Tap Revenge, we took this picture with champagne. There's Tristan there. And my partner Bart, he said to me, my only worry is that now that we're number one, the only place for us to go is down. And at the time, I didn't really pay attention to that, because to me it was simple. I just said, yeah, well, that's why we're working on the next one and the next one. Like, these products will die. And that's why we don't sit here and revel in our success. We finish our champagne and we get back to work. But that was this was the last sane moment of this company. Once we hit number one, everything changed. All of a sudden, we couldn't take risks anymore. All of a sudden, they didn't want rebels in the company. They didn't want pirates. They wanted to be the Navy, just like that. And that's not really what anybody wanted. And the differences in the founders, which is my fault for being a naive and trusting person, once there was actually something to fight over, it just tore the company apart. And this thing just imploded. And they kicked me out, and within a month, the whole team was gone. And so we basically, we had been talking about making a company called United Lemur, and that's really kind of what we were trying to do. And then we met these other guys who had kind of valleyed this thing up. We thought, well, let's just call it Tapulous or whatever. And then when the whole Tapulous thing imploded, then we just kind of got back together and called it United Lemur again. And we did two things in our short life as United Lemur. We worked on the Obama campaign, including the Obama app, and we made an app called Puzzleado, which was the first, and as far as I know, only actual cash contest to run on the App Store, where you actually downloaded this puzzle and the winner actually won $8,000. They banned this kind of thing shortly thereafter. And of course, the Obama iPhone app, which is not super interesting by today's standards, but for 2008, for a political candidate to have an iPhone app when iPhone was just barely out of beta, and for it to leverage the phone in the sense that you could actually look at your contact list through the prism of who lives in a battleground state, who do I need to call about Obama? And there were a lot of people who worked on this app, and the back end, stability and the politics of it and all of this was just completely other people. But when they asked me to help on this, I said, I need Tristan and I need Louis. And as far as I was concerned, I could stop at that point, because having introduced Raven to those two, that was all he needed to be successful. But I was also there to, write some code and screw up a pixel of alignment that has haunted me for the last 10 years. I'm pretty sure it's why Louis doesn't talk to me anymore. I'm pretty sure that pixel is what ended it. I want to tell a story from the Obama campaign, just because this is just one of the most beautiful moments in software that I've ever experienced. So it wasn't enough to make the app, because he still might lose. And so I said that we needed to volunteer for the campaign. We needed to actually go and work for the campaign, because we needed to do everything we could. We needed to exhaust ourselves so that there was nothing left that we could do, so that if he lost, we could not have regret. We could not say what we said after Hillary lost, which is, oh, fuck, we should have done more. There was no more for us to do. When he won, I couldn't even be happy. I was exhausted. But it was still the best fucking day of my life. But the most beautiful day of my life was a couple days earlier, when we were driving through the desert to get there in the middle of the night, Tristan driving with his girlfriend at the time, I'm in the back, and it's just the desert at night and the stars, and we just had, the perfect music playing, some Calexico, slowness, and the stars and their slowness, driving through the desert. And we had this app that we had made together called Twinkle, which was a Twitter client, which was a totally new thing at the time. And it added something, because of the way we had designed it, it added features to Twitter that Twitter later adopted, including the ability to add location to your tweets, and therefore the ability to look at tweets that are nearby you. And we had built this thing in the Valley, and so that was really what's happening right now kind of a feature. But when we were driving through the middle of the desert, man, Twitter was only a few months old, and people were tweeting so scarcely that there were maybe 3 tweets that had ever been tweeted in that desert, and they just stayed there. They never got pushed off. They just stayed there, ghost tweets. And so we would drive through the desert, so empty and so beautiful, and we would see the ghost tweets of people who had been there 3 weeks ago when we had launched the app. And it was just seeing something that we had built together being used in a way that we had never even thought about, in a way that was so striking that it would stay with us for the rest of our lives. That right there is a career worth it, and a friendship forged forever. Unfortunately, the realities of 2008 were that everything around us was on fire, and Puzzleado was not commercially successful. The iOS race to the bottom had begun. The mortgage thing had happened and collapsed the economy, and we all had to go get jobs. I took off my indie shirt and put on my Apple shirt, went to join the mothership. I really, I burned out, and I really wanted to, become a monk. But I'm not Catholic, I'm Apple, so I joined the mothership. But this is key, because even though Tapulous was this sort of beautiful, short-lived tragedy, the seeds from that, like first-generation stars, sort of seeded the universe that followed. This is a chart that Louis made where you can sort of see how the Tapulous people kind of went on to go do these other things that themselves either became successful or went on to seed other things. And there's this sort of mysterious gap in there, which is, that's the United Lemur gap. Brad was Louis' replacement. And Elliot was never part of the company, but he was kind of like an honorary lemur because he published the mathematical solution to my lemur flip sample code that got my name on OS X server. Obviously, Square was successful, and Tristan cashed out and basically spent the rest of his life traveling the world taking incredibly beautiful photographs. And so I kind of want to just spend the rest of my slide deck here just letting some of those play for you, and while I just sort of talk about what happened next. There's a little foreshadowing for you. The first thing that happened was that he got into photography. He wanted to live his dream of being a photographer, and I was proud of him and jealous because that was also my dream. I had been a photographer in college, but I could never make it work because I hadn't, cashed out in some world-changing app. But he was like so irritating as a photographer. In fact, just him being a photographer made him so irritating as a person, because he thought he was Ansel Adams. He really just thought that he had to, he'd see something and it would just strike him, and it's just I'm gonna spend the next 3 hours taking a picture of this. And it'd be like, Ansel Adams, he told his friends and family, hey man, I'm gonna be gone for 3 weeks, and he'd go out and take his pictures. He didn't go with his friends to a restaurant reservation and then halfway there say, oh, there's a tire hanging from a tree, I need to take pictures of it skipping dinner. His dedication to his craft could be really irritating, and the only reason why I sort of forgave him was because, one, he was incredibly talented, and two, it's kind of my fault. That whole twinkle thing, that's exactly the kind of thing. When I was getting these slides ready, I realized he would be furious if I didn't go through and actually check every single one of these to make sure that it looked good on the screen and that the contrast was good. And it's part of me is well, he's not here, so fuck him. But then part of me is I'm the one who taught him that. So, the last time I saw Tristan was when he left Square, but before he got the money, and he came to visit me in Amsterdam, and we hung out like old times and the dream. And yeah, it was fantastic. It was there was so much promise. This money's coming. And it's funny, so he said to me, motherfucker, because that's his term of endearment for me. He said, motherfucker, when I get this money, I am going to take you to Madagascar. Which, kind of a lifelong dream. And so I'm like, cool. And he was pretty irritated with that reaction. And he was like, dude, what's up? Man, I just told you I was gonna take you to Madagascar. And you're just like, eh? And I was just like, well, obviously that would be awesome. But when that happens, I'm gonna be so grateful. But until then, I'm not gonna give you a lifetime dream worth of excitement over a promise of money that's not even here yet, If you haven't learned anything from the Valley, we don't do anything till the ink is dry, man. He never took me to Madagascar. I probably could have gotten him too. I didn't want to be that guy, you know? Hey, when are you going to deliver on the promise you made to me, in the line of all the people who he's probably made promises to? And then he got the money and he just stopped being Tristan, my Tristan. He became your Tristan. After he died, we found his journals, and he had written a pretty detailed description of what he thought about all of us, which was illuminating. And he thought that I had distanced myself from him because of his addiction problem, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I distanced myself from him because he started traveling the world, taking obnoxious Instagram photos, and his motto became, "Fuck normal." And if there's anything that I have tried to instill in the people who I've trained, it is that we serve normal. Normal people are beautiful and powerful. And our purpose on this planet is to empower them, to move us forward as a species. You fucking arrogant, nouveau riche asshole. This is not why we do what we do. To go around the world flaunting our wealth and saying, fuck normal. That's my story of why I stopped talking to Tristan. Everyone who knew him has their own. The last time I talked to Tristan was the second or third to last time he went into rehab, and he wrote this big post about, oh, how a lifetime addiction of alcohol and weed have left him astray. And I'm just like, brother, I know for a fact that you are doing a hell of a lot worse than alcohol and weed. And I don't just mean what you're doing, but I mean how you're doing. And it doesn't make me feel confident that this next rehab attempt is going to be any more successful than the last rehab attempt if you're clearly still trying to lie to everyone, even though we know goddamn well who you are. And so when I found out that he had died at the age of 35 for no fucking reason at all, I was pretty fucking angry. And at the same time, I felt pretty fucking guilty. And that was hard, yeah. Fortunately, I live in a civilized country where mental health is health, and I get to go see all the professionals I need, which is normal. And what I've learned is that, well, for one thing, you have to get over the anger. And you have to get over the guilt. Because unless you get over the anger and the guilt, you're not going to be able to grieve. And if you can't grieve, you can't move forward. My psychiatrist, who himself lost his best friend in a very similar way, he said, you need to stop avoiding. And it's not just because it hurt, but it's because it could have been me. It's because I got into this business because I read about John Carmack and his Ferraris and his women and his money, and I thought, my God, there is a way for me, a nerd, to win like the football players win. Because I wanted to be a rock star. And if I had been given the same choices as Tristan, I don't know that I would have made any different decision. I could have been twice the asshole that he ever was. So my psychiatrist said, you really need to talk to him. You need to see him every day. You need to work this out between you. You need to put his picture up. You need to light a candle. So I did. You know, I'd take walks at night and sit on the side of the canal and roll a joint like we used to and just sit there and smoke with him and talk to him, cry, yell. It's Amsterdam, nobody cares. Yeah, I remember the first day I actually cried. Must have been 6 weeks after it happened. I was so happy. Because I knew that I was beginning to heal. Now I think I'm sort of halfway between acceptance and denial, because I fully accept, I do. I fully do. But sometimes, especially at a conference like this, just for a minute I think I see him, you know? A couple weeks ago, no, maybe a few weeks ago at this point, I was walking down the street in Amsterdam and I saw him, like I saw him. And my first thought was, I knew it, he's faked his own death, and here he is, like, of course, you know. And, you know, that thought lasted for like 5 seconds until I got a closer look, and I felt dumb, embarrassed, but I realized that intellectually I know that he's gone. But there's definitely a part of me that's still in denial. And that's why I'm here. Because when you want to learn something, you have to kind of teach it to others, you know? So I want to talk about a little bit why I think this happened in the first place, and, you know, if this is something that can be avoided. Excuse me, I need to be gross for a second. Gross and human, it's okay. I know you're not judging me. Thank you. I think that the Valley is sick. I think that the culture here is sick. I think that the idea of taking something and building it as fast as possible, as quick as possible, of sacrificing everything and everyone in order to get enough money to become one of those people, I think that it inevitably leaves people without the sense of purpose that defined who they were, while at the same time giving them all the rope they could ever need to hang themselves and anyone else dumb enough to get involved with them. When I tell people about Tristan, they say, oh, is he that guy from Vine who just, nope, that's a different one. Oh, is he the one who just, nope, that's a different one. I don't want to disrespect epidemics by calling it an epidemic, but the Valley is sick. I had a lot of experiences in the Valley. Some of them were awesome. Some of them were awful. But the only time I was ever just really sick, just really felt repulsed by the Valley was when I was sort of standing around with some, you know, VC entrepreneurial types, and they were just laughing at just these people, these fools, who would be satisfied to just, I just have my business and I'm just making a couple million a year and I got my employees and derp. Lifestyle business, they said, dismissively. That really bothered me. Because it's like It's like you're mocking the American dream. Like you're mocking the dream of all of us. It's like you're fucking cancer making fun of healthy cells. Because if Tristan had built a nice little business for himself, a couple million a year, a couple of employees, doing what he does with his best buds, yeah, okay, he wouldn't have been able to be the world-traveling, picture-taking asshole, but, we'd be here remembering Vinay, talking about motorcycles, instead of this. I think the very thing that Silicon Valley sees as pathetic is the very thing that we should be pursuing. For our business, for our purpose, for our life, for our money, our economy, personal, interpersonal, social, for it all to be integrated. For us not to encapsulate the time when we made all the money and the time when we spent it all. To identify ourselves not by what stage we are in the process to fuck you money, but by what we do, by the differences we make, by the changes that we bring. In other words, we should be the people who we talk about being and not the people who we are. I want to talk a little bit, because I have like the 5 minutes, to just talk a little bit about sort of the aftermath just in my life of what happened with Tristan. Like I said, Vinay's dad died, and then Tristan died a week later. And when that happened, I felt numb. I couldn't feel anything except anger, irritation. And it really sucked because, the people around me needed me to be emotionally available to them, and I couldn't be. And, you gotta be careful not to injure something that's numb, or you're gonna end up losing it. I lost Tristan, and then I had my heart broken, and then I broke my foot. And these things were not unrelated. When I could feel again, it was all of a sudden like getting the feeling back in the limb all of a sudden, and every injury, all of a sudden I could feel, my broken heart I could feel. And it was too late. It was done. And then I had to deal with that on top of everything else. And then when the day finally came that I felt good about my heart, and I felt good about my relationship with Tristan, and the sun was shining, and I could put on my skates and go out and get some exercise and feel like the winter was finally over and the summer was finally here, and I felt so goddamn good, I didn't want to walk, I wanted to dance through the streets of Amsterdam. And when something got in my way, I took the opportunity to jump on top of it, and like the beautiful human being I am, strike a glorious pose, and then return to the earth, and like the clumsy person I am, fall very badly and break my foot. And I am so grateful. My God, the level up in my career and my life that I have gotten from this terrible experience. I was professionally trained on the transport of handicapped people and their equipment, and I knew intellectually how difficult it was, but until I had to actually try to take public transit in a wheelchair and ended up, despite the best efforts of like 8 people, dumped in the middle of a fucking street, I had no idea. We say, accessibility is for everyone sometimes, but until all of a sudden I have to know the accessibility infrastructure of everything I do, I knew, but I never knew. And since our job is basically understanding people and their problems and how to contribute to fixing them, I feel like I've just leveled up as an engineer. Because now I understand something that I never would have understood any other way. And I'm even grateful for having my heart broken. I won't get into it. I have yet to figure out why I need to be grateful for what happened with Tristan. I'm grateful I knew him. I'm grateful for the time we had together. I don't yet see the good of the fact that he's not here. So, I just want to please indulge me with one last story because I do not want to leave this on such a sad note. It's just gonna go. Last night I was having dinner with some folks. I didn't really know them, they didn't really know me. We were just having some dinner with some people that you meet at a conference like you do. And one of them said, you know, I'm gonna tell you my favorite technology story. And tells a story about how she has this relationship with her mom, and her mom is just like always wants to let her know that she loves her, and she's always sending her like, here's $10, get yourself some lunch, or here's a Starbucks card, get yourself some coffee, all these little gifts. And it's really nice, but it's also a real pain in the butt to like wrap money up in an envelope and mail it and be like, hey, I sent you money, like make sure that it arrives, and a real pain in the butt. And so it's like, it's awesome that her mom is the way that she is, but it's also a little bit of a pain in the butt. And so finally she says, Mom, you know that there's an app for this. And so now her mom sends her $20 on Square and says, hey, go out and have some dinner, And she said, people, they talk about changing the world and they talk about sea change, but the real change that technology brings is these little moments. Being able to connect with my mom. She doesn't know Tristan. She's never heard the name Tristan OʻTierney. But there he is, making her life better. When I tell people in Europe why I was going to California, they've never even heard of Square. But I say, but like how when you pay for stuff now, it's always like a phone or an iPad? And like, yeah. They were the first people to ever do that. And like, I've been feeling pretty shitty these past few years because pretty much everything I've ever made doesn't exist anymore. And most of the things I've done, nobody's even heard of anymore. And they were so big. On my first day at Apple, I walked into one infinite loop and Tap Tap Revenge was hanging from the ceiling. Who's ever heard of Tap Tap Revenge? What even is that? Is that like Angry Birds? What's Angry Birds? Software, it doesn't last very long. Even our teams, even ourselves. It's all fleeting. Some too soon, all too soon. But it's not the things we make, it's the lives we change. It's those little changes that we make in the way people interact with each other, the way we empower people who couldn't do something, now they can do something, the way we give people who didn't have access to power, access to power. The things we make go away so quickly, but the changes we make, the impacts we make in people's lives, they continue to ripple and ricochet and spread in ways that we cannot even imagine. And that's why we do what we do. And that's the legacy of Tristan, and one day, if we're lucky, that'll be the legacy of us all. I've never heard of you, I've never heard of your product, but everything is a little bit different because you were here. And I hope that everything will be a little bit different because you're all here. Thank you very much. Yeah, cool.
Thank you. That was a powerful message. So I'm just going to let that sit. We'll be back at the top of the hour.